Evan Miles had dreamed of being a singer since he was a kid growing up in a small Tennessee town. He would stand on his porch, holding a cheap guitar, singing Elvis Presley songs for his neighbors. Everyone called him Little Elvis, not just because of the way he styled his hair but because of the passion in his voice. As the years went by, life didn't make it easy. Bills piled up, small gigs barely paid enough for gas, and every rejection letter made the dream feel further away. But Evan refused to give up. At 26, he still believed he had something special to share with the world. One night, after performing at a local diner, he got a chance to meet a manager who had once worked with someone from Elvis's original circle. Evan thought it was his big break. He nervously played his heart out, hoping to impress the man. When he finished, the manager took a long drag from his cigarette and said coldly, "Kid, you're good, but at 26, you're too old for this business. The industry wants young faces, not old souls." Those words hit him like a knife. He walked out of that building into the cold night, feeling like his dream had just died right there on the sidewalk. For weeks, Evan didn't pick up his guitar. His friends tried to lift him up, but his confidence was gone. Every time he looked in the mirror, he could still hear that voice calling him, too old. Then one morning, while scrolling on his phone, he saw an announcement that America's Got Talent auditions were coming to Nashville. Something sparked inside him again. Maybe he couldn't impress that manager, but maybe he could show the world that music has no age limit. He packed his old guitar, the same one he'd used since high school, and signed up for the audition. When the day came, the backstage area was packed with hopeful contestants. Dancers, magicians, kids half his age were warming up. Evan felt out of place. Some of the other singers looked at him curiously, wondering if he was there to perform or maybe to help someone else. He took a deep breath and tightened the strap on his guitar. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. When the stagehand finally called his name, he stepped into the blinding lights of the AGT stage. The audience looked massive, stretching out into darkness. The judges sat before him, Simon Cowell, Heidi Klum, Howie Mandel, and Sofia Vergara, all waiting silently. Simon looked at him with that usual skeptical look and asked, "What's your name?" "Evan Miles, sir." "And how old are you?" 26. Simon raised an eyebrow. There was a faint murmur from the audience. "What are you going to sing for us?" Evan smiled nervously. "A song I wrote, inspired by Elvis Presley." Simon leaned back slightly, unimpressed. "Let's hear it." The lights dimmed, and a single spotlight fell on Evan. He gripped his guitar tightly, his palms sweating. The crowd went silent. Then he spoke softly into the microphone, "This one's for the man who taught me that real music never gets old." He strummed the first note, and the sound echoed through the hall like thunder. The moment he began to sing, everything changed. His voice wasn't just good, it was magnetic. It carried the raw soul and emotional power of Elvis, but it was also something deeply his own. The audience, which had been restless moments ago, froze in awe. Every note seemed to hit a place in their hearts they didn't know existed. Heidi leaned forward, whispering something to Sophia. Howie nodded in rhythm, his smile growing wider with each line. Simon, who had been leaning back casually, slowly sat up, eyes fixed on Evan. His expression softened from doubt to shock. The lyrics told the story of chasing a dream that the world said was impossible, of standing back up when everyone told you to quit. By the time Evan reached the final chorus, half the audience was standing, clapping in time with the beat. The energy in the room was electric. People could feel something real, something timeless. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence, and then the crowd erupted into applause. Evan stood frozen, his chest rising and falling, tears welling in his eyes. He didn't know what the judges would say, but he knew one thing for sure: he had just proved that being 26 wasn't too old to live your dream. As the cheers filled the theater, Evan stood still on the stage, his hands trembling around his guitar. He had dreamed of that moment for years but never imagined it would feel this overwhelming. The applause didn't sound like just approval, it sounded like validation, like every sleepless night, every rejection, and every lonely song he'd written had finally been worth it. Simon Cowell, who had been quiet throughout the performance, still hadn't spoken. His silence made the moment even more intense. Evan scanned the faces of the judges, his heart pounding. Heidi was smiling widely, her eyes glistening with emotion. Sophia clapped excitedly, saying to Howie, he's like from another time. Howie nodded and said, it's like Elvis is in the room, but it's not an imitation, it's real. Simon finally leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Evan. You know, Simon said slowly, I thought we were about to get another impersonator. But you've got something no one's heard in a long time. That voice, it's honest. It's rare. The crowd cheered again, but Simon wasn't finished. You wrote that song yourself? He asked. Evan nodded. Yes, sir. It's called Old Soul. Simon smiled faintly. Fitting name. You just reminded us what music used to mean. The audience roared, and Evan's knees nearly gave out from the emotion. Backstage, the producers were buzzing. They could feel they had just witnessed something special, something that could go viral overnight. Contestants waiting their turn peeked out from behind the curtains, whispering about the Elvis guy. Evan wiped his eyes and looked up at the confetti-filled stage as he walked off. For the first time in years, he felt seen. In the days that followed, his performance spread across social media. Clips of his audition hit millions of views within hours. People from all over the world commented, finally, real music again, and, he sounds like he's from the golden era of rock. But Evan wasn't thinking about fame. He was thinking about how it felt to sing his heart out and prove to himself that he wasn't too old or too late. When AGT called to tell him he'd made it to the live shows, he sat on his couch in disbelief. He whispered a quiet thank you to the universe and to Elvis, whose music had given him courage when no one else did. When Evan returned to the stage for the live show, everything felt bigger, brighter lights, louder crowd, and higher stakes. The judges welcomed him back with smiles, but Simon's look was serious, expectant. Evan Miles, Simon said, your audition was unforgettable. Tonight, you've got one chance to prove it wasn't luck. What will you be singing? Evan took a deep breath. A song I wrote for everyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough. It's called Stand Again. As the lights dimmed and the first soft chords echoed, the audience went silent once more. His voice came in gently at first, filled with pain and power. The song's lyrics spoke about falling down, hearing the world laugh, and finding the strength to rise anyway. It was haunting, emotional, and filled with truth. Halfway through, the music swelled, and Evan's voice soared over the melody. The emotion in the room was thick, people in the front rows were wiping their eyes. Simon sat still, one hand over his mouth, watching every move. When the song ended, Evan let the final note hang in the air before lowering his guitar. The room exploded again with applause. Heidi stood first, clapping above her head. Howie shouted over the noise, that's what this show is about. Sophia was smiling with tears in her eyes. Simon finally stood, walked to the front of the judges' table, and said, Evan, that was magic. He paused for a moment, then looked toward the big golden buzzer in front of him. The crowd sensed what was about to happen and began chanting, press it. Press it. Simon smiled, nodded slowly, and slammed his hand down. The buzzer exploded in gold confetti, filling the air as the audience screamed. Evan fell to his knees, overwhelmed, crying into his hands as the golden lights shimmered around him. Simon's voice echoed through the cheers, Evan Miles, you just made history. Backstage, the producers cheered, and even the crew members were emotional. Evan stood up, covered in gold, his dream now alive in front of the entire world. He had once been called too old, but in that moment, he was timeless. The night Evan's golden buzzer audition aired, his life changed in a single heartbeat. Within hours, his phone blew up with calls, messages, and notifications he couldn't keep up with. The video of his performance was spreading faster than he could process. Millions of people were watching him sing, sharing his story, and tagging him with messages like, you proved them wrong, and, real music is back. He stayed up all night scrolling through comments, tears running down his face. Fans from around the world told him how his song, Old Soul, reminded them of their parents, of a time when music meant something. He read a message from a young girl who said, I was going to give up on my dream, but your story made me want to keep going. That one message hit him harder than anything else. Evan realized his music wasn't just about chasing fame, it was about touching lives. The same manager who once called him too old tried to reach out, leaving a voicemail saying he wanted to talk. Evan listened but didn't call back. He didn't need validation anymore. He had the world's attention now. The press wanted interviews, radio shows invited him, and even a record label sent a contract. But Evan stayed grounded. He spent most of his time practicing, rewriting his songs, and preparing for the finals. Fame was new, but music was still sacred to him. The next few weeks on America's Got Talent were intense. He performed classic-inspired songs mixed with his original writing style. Each week, he earned standing ovations, and Simon kept calling him the most authentic voice of the season. But the fame wasn't always easy. Social media started picking apart everything about him: his look, his accent, even his age again. Some said he was a nostalgia act, not a true modern artist. It stung, but Evan didn't let it break him. Late at night, he'd sit in his apartment, holding his old guitar, whispering, "You've come this far. Don't let them take your peace." When the day of the final performance came, Evan woke up before sunrise. He didn't eat, didn't talk much. He just sat quietly, staring at the sunrise outside his hotel window, thinking about how far he'd come. He remembered the small-town diner shows, the rejections, the manager's cruel words, and the moment Simon hit that golden buzzer. Everything had led to this. When he walked onto the stage for the final time, the audience erupted before he even spoke. Simon smiled warmly and said, "Welcome back, Elvis of the new age." Evan chuckled softly, then said, "This song is called Still Here. It's about never giving up, no matter who tries to count you out." The lights faded, and he began to play. The melody was slow and soulful, filled with heartbreak and hope. His voice had never sounded stronger. Every note carried years of pain, struggle, and triumph. The song spoke about surviving rejection, about standing tall even when no one believed in you. The crowd was silent, completely absorbed in his performance. It felt like everyone in the room was breathing in rhythm with his voice. When he reached the final line, "I may be older, but I'm still here," his voice cracked with emotion, and that was the moment everyone felt it. He wasn't just singing. He was living his truth right there on stage. When the music stopped, there was total silence for a few seconds before the audience exploded into cheers. People stood up shouting, clapping, and crying. Simon stood again, this time visibly emotional, and said, "Evan, you just gave us one of the greatest performances in AGT history. You've proven that talent doesn't have an expiration date." Howie was clapping above his head, yelling, "That's what this show was made for." Heidi had tears in her eyes, and Sophia was nodding proudly. Evan smiled through tears as the camera zoomed in on his face. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about winning or losing. He was just grateful. When the results were announced later that night, the lights flashed, the crowd held its breath, and the host shouted, "The winner of America's Got Talent is Evan Miles." Confetti poured down again, this time not gold but silver and blue. Evan dropped to his knees, speechless. The judges stood, clapping for him as he cried, overwhelmed by what had just happened. The same man who had been told he was too old to start had now become a national sensation. Months later, Evan released his debut album, also titled Still Here. The album topped charts within days and was praised for its soul, honesty, and throwback sound. In every interview, when asked what message he wanted to give to others, he always said the same thing: dreams don't have deadlines. If you still believe, you're not too late. His story became one of the most inspiring moments in AGT history, a reminder that no matter your age or your struggle, the right song can change everything.